We are officially live. Welcome, everyone. Very happy to, as I said, welcome Kevin McIntosh from One America Movement. He is the Michigan Regional Outreach Manager. And the mission of the One America Movement is to build a united American society by eliminating toxic polarization. Kevin earned his BA in Religious Studies and History from Emory University and his Master of Theological Studies from Harvard Divinity School. Prior to joining the One America Movement, Kevin served as the coordinator of Campus Interfaith Resources with the Kaufman Interfaith Institute at Grand Valley State University. Please help me welcome Kevin McIntosh.
I'm so excited to be here. I'm so excited that you all were able to come out. I'm glad there's no snow. That hopefully was an easy commute for those here or for those watching online that you're able to make it as well. It's just great to be in a packed room with people who care and want to be here to help push down, fight back against toxic polarization that's been rising up these last few years. There we go. That's me. So I'm Kevin McIntosh. I work for the One America Movement. Again, our mission is to help eliminate toxic polarization. I'll talk a little bit more about our mission, how we do that, who we work with in a second. But before I do, if I could ask you to quickly take out your phones. We'll try to make this is just a quick survey to see where people stand before we start. But throughout the presentation, we'll have some Slido questions as well. We can pull out your phone and scan. I'm A-OK. I used to work with college students, so I'm A-OK with folks take out their phones, using notes on there, and doing whatever you need to do. But hopefully this works. Just take you to a Google form with a couple questions. There's always the scary part. Our office, the default thing for the forms is to only let One America staff members go into it. So you either have to uncheck that box. And often I've come to presentations where we don't do that. So it's always the first scary thing at a presentation to see, does the form actually work? If you don't get it, it's not a huge deal. I'll give a couple more seconds. If you don't have it, it's okay. You don't actually need to fill out the survey. It just helps us get sort of a baseline as we do the presentations. I'm going to talk a little bit about what we do at the One America Movement. Our mission is to eliminate toxic polarization. We think if we work with congregations to shape norms and help cities and communities build cross-cutting identities, which we'll talk about later, but identities that we can share, we can help do that. So we come to places like this to give presentations within faith communities. And then we also work across divides. In Jackson, Mississippi, we have a group there working with Black churches and white evangelical churches come together around the water crisis that's happening. In Danville, Virginia, we have churches, synagogues, and mosques come together to help push back against racism that's been in that city. In different cities, different places, we have groups of folks that have different political persuasions, different religious traditions coming together to solve common issues, local community issues. We have some really great partners in our work. I'll show some slides with some data, but I just want to highlight these three: beyond conflict, over zero, and more in common. And I'll highlight them again as I show some of their data. Those are just three really great partners. And if you're interested in some of the research or some of the science that we show you or some of the numbers, I'll try to point out when we use their stuff. Those are some great places to go to. So we have a lot of people here. So I'm going to ask you to sort of get to know your neighbors, right? I think toxic polarization happens when we get to know each other and we start telling stories. For the folks that were here last time, we practiced how to talk to your neighbor, how to have stories. So today, just for a quick icebreaker, just so you get to know the people around you. Can you just say your name and then what verse, poem, story, hymn, what from your tradition or your history encourages you to be here tonight? So I know for me, I think about my family, my parents. The first time when I realized sort of somebody was like, oh, we don't want to be friends. Somebody was trying to tell me in high school, I think, or in middle school, that we shouldn't be friends with, I shouldn't be friends with this person because of X or Z reasons. And I told my parents were like, no, that's not okay. That's not what we do in our family. So I think of that story often in my history as a way to be like, we're here together as a community. We're here. Doesn't matter your beliefs or who you are. We are here together in this place to care about one another. So I invite you to share at your tables. It could be personal stories. It could be a verse. It could be a poem, a hymn, whatever it is that helps bring you here. What brought you here today? I'm going to give you a couple seconds to talk to the people around you.
And for folks online.
Welcome back to those on Zoom. Welcome back. I hope, as we go into small groups or breakout rooms, you get to know the people at your table or in your breakout rooms a little bit more as we continue these conversations. When I go into spaces, into churches or organizations, and I say our One America's goal is to bring people together, I get asked often two questions. The first question, this thing works, there we go, is, does this mean I need to find common ground with extremists? And the answer is no, right? There are people out there, the KKK, neo-Nazis, folks who are out there who just want to have hate. Our organization is not asking us to build bridges with them. The organizations that do it, somebody needs to build bridges with those groups in order to help lower the extremism. We're not asking you to do that. We're asking you, that person that sits next to you in the pew, who you disagree with politically, to come together and have good conversations. That person who might be your neighbor, who has a different yard sign up every November than you. Right? We're asking you to still solve neighborhood issues with that person. We're not asking you to go befriend the KKK or neo-Nazis, whatever group you want to think of. We're asking you to become friends or talk to or have conversations with that person next to you, with your neighbor. We also get asked, does this work mean I need to compromise my values? Right? If I am a staunch believer in this political position, do I need to water that down to work together? If I strongly believe in my strongest core that this is right or this is truth, do I need to water that down? Do I need to be less than my whole self to come to the table to build bridges? And again, the answer is no. We want people to be fully themselves, to engage with people who are fully themselves. Right? We want people who disagree to be able to have a conversation around that disagreement, walk away, and you can still say that person was wrong, but I understand their story a little bit more. We were just talking about the J series, and Monica Guzman spoke a couple days ago, and her thing is be curious, right? We want people to say, I never thought about it that way. I never thought about your story until now. I still disagree with you, and that's okay, but I see your story. So I want to ask a couple questions. If you can pull out your phones again, that'd be great. If it doesn't work, if your scanner doesn't work, you can just think about where you would rank yourself on these questions. Or if you're on your computer on Zoom, you can also go to slido.com and go to this number. But I'll give some time for people to scan this. I was going to ask 3 questions. Well, you'll say on a scale of 1 to 5 where you rank yourself on this question. How important this question is to you, how often you think it happens.
Are you getting access to that? So.
Yeah.
Let's type your question.
Huh.
Oh,
Well, that's not good.
Oh, no.
I got
No.
it.
Did something happen?
Yeah.
It's on there now.
I'm in now. Cool. I just go to the next slide. 5 means you agree all the way. 1 means you don't agree. So the first question is, I worry about the division in our country on a regular basis. I worry about this division in our country on a regular basis. Our numbers are going to be off. I've actually never had this happen before where the poll from the last time I used this carried over. It always erases itself. And so I apologize for that. It's just a little bit off. But so yeah, 5 is all the way. 1 is never. I worry about the division on a regular basis. All right, so many of us are 4, 3.8 is our average, right? It might be something that we think about, maybe not every day, but it pops up if we're watching the news, or it pops up when in November, right? When those yard signs come up, or in different ways, it might pop up here and there, but it's not something that we think about 24/7. The divisions in our country affect my congregation. And when I say congregation, I'll let you think about either your congregation, your church if you go to church, an organization you belong to, or something else. So the divisions in our country affect my congregation, organization.
Say 3. I wasn't saying 4. Let's do 3.
All right. So 3. So sometimes it might, right? Again, it might matter on what the divisions is or what that policy is or what the question is. But sometimes it doesn't. We said often. The divisions in our country impact my relationships with people I care about.
Yeah.
The divisions in our country, that was quick.
5.
Divisions in our country impact my relationships with people I care about. Lots of 4s, a couple 2s, a couple 5s, a few 1s, and a couple 3s. Again, 3.4. This is personal stuff, right? My guess is there's a lot of things you all could be doing on Thursday night. And when I say toxic polarization, I bet many of you could close your eyes and think of the person, right? Think of the person that you're polarized with. We just had Christmas and New Year's. Think about that person who you just disagreed with at the Christmas table. I'm sure many of us can think of that person, right? These are personal things. Divisions impact us in many different ways. And even if we don't think about it every day, even if it doesn't impact our congregation, many of us have that person that is impacted. I also wonder sometimes if this said like impacted a relationship with somebody I care about, how the numbers are changed or not. But it impacts, again, this is the highest one we've had so far, with most people saying 4. Again, our average is 3.4, but it's personal. A big thing in our work is to differentiate between toxic polarization and normal polarization. So what do we mean? I've used the word toxic polarization a couple of times now. We throw it out. And there's a really big distinction. Normal polarization is what it is. It happens. When my fiance and I decide where we're going to go to dinner and we disagree, that is polarization. It's politics. There's disagreement. When 2 congresspeople or senators or you and your neighbor disagree on a political issue, that's polarization. Polarization allows for really creative solutions. Disagreement is okay, right? Polarization is normal. Normal polarization is I disagree with you on a issue. We used to do a lot of sports analogies, and then people used to think that normal polarization was sports and toxic polarization was like all the hard stuff. And so I want to make sure that's not what it is. Right? We root for different teams. We disagree on gun policy. We might disagree on abortion or immigration or whatever your hot topic issue of the day is. It is what it is. It's static. You're probably not, you might change, I might change, but probably not. We're probably going to stay where we are in our positions, and that's okay. It becomes toxic when it's, I don't like who you are. It's not, I don't like your idea. It's, I don't like who you are. It's when your team is evil and must be stopped. Not that we root for different teams, but your team is now evil. And it gets worse and worse. When polarization becomes toxic, it doesn't just start with that one thing. It goes to the next thing, and then the next thing, and the next thing. And eventually, people boil down the other side to a characterization. We don't think of the other side as a parent or a brother or a fellow Catholic or a fellow Christian. We see them just in the political sense as Republican, Democrat. No other identity in that sense matters. And again, it gets worse and worse. There's a quote I love, I usually show on this slide, from John Inzu, who's a political scientist. And he says that when we switch from you are wrong to you are evil, it's really worrisome. Because when I say you are wrong, it means we can have a debate. I can convince you. It might take a long time, but I can try to convince you that I am right and you are wrong. When I say you are evil, it leads to avoidance, and it can lead to much worse than that. So a key indicator of toxic polarization is not really how we view the issues, right? The issues are there. We filter polarization often through the issues, and the issues are important. Again, that's often where it starts. But it's not how we view the issues, it's how we view each other. So I have 2 questions here. This will be the last time we use Slido. I want to see, just make sure that the normal versus toxic stuck. So I have a pop quiz. So I want to know, if you heard this quote, what do you think this is, a normal polarization or toxic? We might disagree on immigration, but we're able to work together on homelessness. We might disagree on one thing, disagree on immigration, we're able to work together on homelessness. Yeah, that's normal, right? We can hold our tension up here and we can debate, disagree, argue about this. We're able to still come together over here. Another quote you might hear: I can't believe they voted for that candidate. They must not care about anything at all. I can't believe they voted for that candidate. Is that normal or more toxic? That becomes a little bit more toxic, right? It's a little bit more lumping all their positions into one thing and assuming everything about them. Cool. So one of the things that toxic polarization does, and this is what the video is going to get to, is it puts us into what we call singular rigid identities. So in the video, there's a parrot person and a cat person. You can think of them as Republicans and Democrats, but in the video, we use parrot people and cat people. And the parrot person does not like cats, and the cats do not like parrots. And everything else that they see in their identity boils down to, I'm a cat person or I'm a parrot person. Nothing else matters. And in that moment, anything they might agree on, anything they might become friends with, they can't see, because our identities boil down into the one thing. I'm a Republican or I'm a Democrat. I'm a parrot person or I'm a cat person. I think of Aladdin, right? Let me go back before I say my Aladdin quote. We are made up of lots of identities, right? If I asked you, which we sometimes do, to write down identities about yourself, you could probably fill up a whole page, not more, right? We are Grand Rapidians, we're Michiganders, we are runners or walkers or bikers or nature lovers or game lovers or football lovers, basketball lovers, parents, grandparents, sons, daughters, et cetera, et cetera. We can go down a litany of things who we are. What toxic polarization does is it brings us down to this itty bitty little space. To quote the genie in Aladdin, brings us down to this itty bitty space. We only see ourselves through one thing. We only see ourselves as Republican or Democrat, to name the 2 big ones. And everything we are, if we are a good Catholic, that means we have to be a good Republican or good Democrat. If we're a good parent, it means we're a good Republican or a good Democrat. Everything filters through that lens. And what singular rigid identities can cause is a dangerous feedback loop. Because as we get to our people, as we stay with our people on our side, and we think the other side is extreme, we don't want to work with them, those middle voices get quieter and those loud voices get louder. The folks who get airtime on cable TV, the folks whose articles populate much faster on social media, those are the folks who get the time. And the folks sort of more in the middle get pushed to the sides as well, when people aren't able to communicate across divides. And we see this happen. When this happens, we see things play out in a couple different ways. We're going to focus in on one of these today, but I just want to name some of the main drivers of toxic polarizations that we see. We see something called misperceptions about other groups. When we assume the other side all want one thing, we assume the other side's monolithic. So in this example, we assume all Democrats want no immigration restrictions, or we want the other one. We assume all Republicans want completely closed borders. We have something called meta perceptions. This is a confusing one, and I'll get into this one more, but how individual perceives others' perceptions of themselves. So if I think all Democrats don't like me because I'm a Republican, or if I think all Republicans don't like me because I'm a Democrat. Mis and disinformation that's out there really drives toxic polarization. Toxic partisanship, when we allow folks on our side, whatever that means, to get a free pass, when we wouldn't allow somebody on the other side to get that same pass. And then dehumanization, bigotry, racism, etc. All 5 of these things push toxic polarization to get louder. So why is this happening? I'll just say, as we go through this, if people have questions, I'll have a space in a little bit for questions, but if you have questions in between, please ask. Why is this happening? It's because of this. What do people see on the screen right now?
Faces.
Faces? Faces? Folks on Zoom, do you also see faces? Yeah, I can see a nod. Yeah, we see faces. We look for faces. We look for emotions. I do this presentation with college students sometimes, and we ask them, which of these would you want to be friends with? And we take a poll. The seatbelt wins. The grader wins, right? These aren't faces. These are a seatbelt, a backpack, a faucet, a trailer hitch, a cheese grater, and a really weird looking pepper. But we give them emotions, right? Quickly, we say the cheese grater's smiling. The backpack's angry. We always have one college student who wants to be friends with the pepper. We give people faces, and we do that because of her. Because if we went back to a long time ago, before AC and before chairs, we're out in the wilderness, and we looked out onto this grass, and we saw a face, we better go in the other direction, right? Because if she was out there and we didn't see her, if we couldn't recognize a face, we would probably be eaten, right? If we looked in this grass and didn't see something. So we look for faces quickly as we look out. We look for faces and we decide, are they friend or foe? Real fast. We create groups automatically. Again, it's because of her. I like to run. I like to work out. I don't think I could take her one-on-one, right? If it's a group of us, right? If it's me and this table, we could do it, right? If it's me and this table or that table, we could do it. We could take on the lion or lioness. But one-on-one, maybe not. And because of that, we need groups to survive. We need groups, whether it's our religious community, whether it's our neighborhood, whether it's our racial, political, whatever it is, we need groups to help survive. And there's two things about groups and about loneliness that will come up. One is a little bit scientific. So our Surgeon General Murphy said that during his years caring for patients, the most dangerous thing he saw wasn't heart disease or diabetes, it was loneliness. Loneliness and weak social connections were associated with a reduction of lifespan similar to that caused by smoking 15 cigarettes a day. We need each other. I'm with folks who are here at Catholic Information Center, so I'll do a little bit of theology if that's okay. It's also biblical. God says in Genesis 2:18, it is not good that man should be alone. It's the first time in the Genesis story that he says something wasn't good. That people should not be alone, that humans need each other. And we make groups fast. It said we make groups, we look at somebody and we can decide if they're part of our group or not in less than a second as we're walking around. We can decide quickly. We have to decide quickly to survive if they're in our group or not. And once we are part of a group, and this is what makes toxic polarization difficult, because once we are part of a group, its survival is our survival. If the group doesn't survive, and that's our people, what happens to us? Wolves know this, right? Wolves are in pack animals. They raise cubs up in packs. They hunt together in packs. They know that to survive, they need to be in this group. They need to be in a pack. They need to work together. And humans know or do this, is that what are we willing to do to maintain our group membership? And the answer is almost about anything. So in this photo, one of my coworkers loves this photo because you'll see this person in the back corner stand as far as you can away from taking this silly photo. Really does not want to be in this silly photo at a wedding. But then once it happens and he realizes he's the only one not doing it, he joins very quickly, right? He's joining, he's up front, he's being goofy and silly with everybody else. Now, this is a low example, right? Taking a photo in a group setting is something that we do. But think about other things that we do to maintain group solidarity, to be in our groups, to make sure the group survives and that we don't get kicked out. So what happens when our groups collide? What happens when two groups are next to each other and they collide with each other? What do we do if we think somebody hates us?
Avoid them.
You avoid them? Hate them back? Fight them? Is there somebody on Zoom? Can I get an answer for somebody on Zoom? Go to in the chat or unmute yourself.
I would avoid them.
Avoid them?
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah. I've heard fight, hate them, avoid them. I've also heard in previous things, again, with college students especially, that they go and try to do everything they can to be their best friend, that they will do everything they can. But no matter what, it changes how we treat them, right? Whether we avoid them or fight them or try to be extra nice to them. If we think somebody hates us, it changes how we treat them. And we call this meta perceptions, right? When we think that somebody on the other side dislikes us. In some presentations I do, I will zoom in on this California soccer mom, and I'll ask people to write down or say who's driving that car. And I get often mom lives in California, it's a BMW, maybe rich. It will get down sometimes into she is wearing Lululemon jogger pants and is drinking Starbucks. And it's gone down to they may not like me because I don't have kids and they have kids and their whole life involves around their kids and that we probably just wouldn't get along. Right? Very quickly, we assume somebody's whole life story based on a license plate, based on a t-shirt, based on a hat, based on a yard sign. Very quickly, we decide based on these things if that person likes us or not. Again, the trivial example here is I don't want to sit down next to this person because she's wearing a vegan t-shirt, I'm eating a burger, and she probably won't like that, right? The more realistic answer could be, I don't want to go knock on my neighbor's door to ask for something or to tell them something's wrong with their car because they have a Biden, Trump, Whitmer, a Dixon, whatever political position you want, sign in their yard, and I have the opposite. If I go knock on the door, we're just going to get in an argument. So I'm not going to tell them that this thing's wrong with their car because I don't want to deal with that. Right? We assume people on the other side don't like us and we're in a fight if we see a t-shirt, a hat, or something else. And we assume these things because of all these gases. We assume these things of social media and talk radio and the 24-hour news cycle and cable news and outside influences. All these things that are telling us that other side's evil, that other side doesn't like you, that other side is out to get you. I got good news though. There's something called false polarization. And we have more in common than we think in the United States. False impressions are pulling us apart. So in 2018, and this data is still the same, but this graph's from 2018, our partners at Beyond Conflict asked Democrats and Republicans 2 questions. The first question was on immigration. If we're going to ask you if we should have completely open or completely closed borders. If you're a Democrat, what do you think Republicans would say? That's question number 1. And question number 2 is, what do you say? And then vice versa for Republicans. What do you think Democrats would say? And what do you think Republicans would say? And on this graph, you are seeing in the red is what Democrats said Republicans would say. And the blue is what Republicans thought Democrats would say. And they are very far apart. No middle ground, no common ground, no room for nuance, no room for discussion. Democrats thought that Republicans wanted the border completely closed. And Republicans thought Democrats wanted it completely open. And if this is what they believe, what's the point of trying to work together? What's the point of trying to find common ground? If we are so far apart, we can't even imagine what compromise might look like. We are so far apart, we can't even imagine what this nuance could be. But in reality, when they ask Democrats, what do you believe? And they ask Republicans what they believed, there's a lot more overlap. There's a lot more overlap. We're not saying it's right. We're not saying that Republicans and Democrats agreed on everything, but there is space. There is space to find that understanding. There's space to talk about the nuances and the gray and the questions. And some Republicans, I always find interesting, some Republicans are way over on the 0 for completely open borders. And some Democrats are way over on the 100 for completely closed borders. People, groups aren't monolithic. Folks within the groups have varying viewpoints. And we can come together for bipartisan agreement or conversation. This is true. These graphs are hard to read. And I know that, and I apologize. But this is true. These false perceptions is true on almost every hot button issue. Whether it is immigration or racism or sexism, these questions are showing what Democrats thought Republicans would say on some of the hot topic things for Republicans, and then what Republicans would actually say. You can see that on almost every single one, the perception gap was pretty far off. Democrats didn't understand what Republicans actually thought. They heard the sound bites, they heard the media, they saw the podcasts or the cable news, and they went to the very extreme. And same for Republicans towards Democrats. And even independents. I know some of us in the room might be independents. And so independents were also asked what they thought about Republicans in this one, same with Democrats, and they were also off for almost every question. So I get asked before you go into small groups and breakout rooms, I get asked sometimes about this, is that don't some folks who wear a t-shirt with a stance on it or have the billboard on their sign, aren't they saying that they're proud of, their stance, that they wear those for a reason, right? And that might be some of what you're thinking, like, they have these signs out and they are proud of that sign or they're proud of the positions. And that might be true. What polarization does, I know this has happened to me, when somebody has that sign up or posts that thing on Facebook that I disagree with, right? I automatically assume that every policy position they have is equal to whatever their candidate is or whoever their candidate is. And I find out, as I was talking to one of my coworkers about gun control, we're having a conversation about guns. And I knew he loves guns. I was dreading having this conversation with them, but if we're going to do the work, we have to be in the work and we have to have hard conversations. So we're having a conversation about gun control, about guns. And he told me, while he owns a gun, he also hates the NRA. And so it gave me nuance to his position. And very quickly, I remembered, right, we have perception gaps. All of us do. We have times where we assume quickly that based on one fact we know about somebody, we can ascribe the whole position on 20 other opinions. And that's just not true. So we really won't have time for all three of these questions. We're going to give you all about 15 minutes or so to pick one, talk about in your group. So the three questions. Research shows that people often have inaccurate views about the other side. Does your own experience line up with what that research says? How might perception gaps impact relationships between groups in your community? Again, this could be your congregation, an organization, your family group, whatever you want to pick for that. And then lastly, how might this research cause you to question some of your own assumptions? When are you most likely to make these assumptions? So those are the three questions. We'll give you, like I said, about 10-ish minutes to talk about those in your groups. We've gone through a lot, went through some numbers and data. And so I wanted to start off with, does anybody have any questions or anything that resonated more or had questions on any of the things that we talked about so far? I'm going to move into some strategies next, but before we get to the strategy, but how do we deal with all of this?
Good.
Does anybody have questions about the data or some of the science portion?
I'm not, we had a great conversation, I think. And he was courageous enough to put a real issue out. And it happened to be religious, which is almost, you can count on extreme as politicians, and Catholic versus Protestant, right? And then what it's like to have somebody you love and grew up with, you separate from them because each perceive the other as wrong. So we've grown up in a world of it's always either or, right or wrong. And we don't know the science of both and we don't know how to have the conversations that lead us to hold each other in respect. Although I don't like you, but I will respect you, and ask the right question, say the right things. That takes discipline and work.
Yeah.
So.
And just a comment on the second question there is, how do you change the perception gap? I have a gap between me and my sister. I've just converted Catholic and she's Protestant, and there's perception gap there. I don't know how to bridge it. I don't want it to tear us apart, but I don't know how to bridge that gap.
Come next week for our ecumenical dialogue. Other questions in the.
There's somebody on
Or
Zoom
comments.
as well.
Yeah, Vicky, go ahead.
Thank you. I just wanted to share that my husband, Steve, offered the point of, again, when people get together and realize in a conversation, he has been working on, when he was in his work, on biases, and how many of our biases are formed because from outside information. It's not that we actually know a person or a person of a different race. It's whatever we have perceived. So being aware that we're very skewed by information and not personal relationship. And I hope I represented you well, Steve, there with my comment.
So I think pulling Vicky's point with, it's Bobby, right? Your conversation with your sister, I think those personal relationships, like being able to have that conversation, and we'll talk in a second about our cross-cutting identities. So what do we still share together while we disagree or might have differences in other spaces? And how can we have conversations around whether it's service, so doing how-to projects together with people that we disagree with, and come together and say like, hey, well, we'll get to that in a second. We disagree here, but we can come together and build houses and focus again on that local issues. One more.
Hold on, Nancy. Let me get over here.
I was just going to say, I visited Northern Ireland about 10 years ago, and what you're talking about in terms of everything being binary, it's just your entire identity is Catholic or Protestant, even if you're an atheist.
Yeah.
Like you have to choose up sides, and I see our country kind of going in that direction, like where big cities are liberal and rural areas are conservative.
We'll sometimes have on one of our slides a elephant, a donkey, and then Cookie Monster for that point. Like what happens to those folks who aren't extremely like Republican or Democrat? What happens to Cookie Monster in that sense? If you don't fit neatly in either of those boxes, like where do you go? We're forced to pick sides.
It feels that when you're in a conflict with someone who holds a different belief and you challenge their belief, it just makes them dig in
It does.
deeper. And then if they come back to you, then you also have to dig your heels in. And even though you're sometimes taking a position maybe you don't feel that strongly about because of your group, you want to just dig in and not have any kind of relationship with that person.
Yeah, we call that the backfire effect, where if there's a Facebook thread and somebody throws an article, and then I throw an article, and then they throw an article, and then you get more and more ingrained in your own positions. And so stories, we say often, stories is what drives people to conversation. And then eventually, if you want to have an actual discussion, you can bring data and numbers. But if you start with the data and the numbers, that'll get people, like you said, more ingrained, and they'll throw their numbers back at you. But if you start with that story about why you care about that issue, it can be a softer on-ramp.
We have Mary Ellen online. Go ahead,
Thank
Mary
you.
Ellen.
Thank you. You know, in various situations, one of them is when I'm driving and I see folks on the street corner with a sign asking for monies and things, we here in Columbus had a very unfortunate relationship with the new bishop, but I've often thought I would love to sit down with those people, and I'd love to sit down with the bishop and say, tell me your story, because I think we don't necessarily have any idea of the steps that people have had in their lives that get them to the point where they are now. And I think for me, that would be a wonderful way of getting to know people with a question that's not a judgmental thing, or that I haven't made the decision about that person, but I'm listening to their story.
What we can do is, for the folks that were here last time, we did storytelling through difficult conversations, or how to talk to your neighbor. We have a guide at the end that it breaks the conversation down to 3 parts. And if Mark has it, so if you want to send that back out, and then you can go with somebody, you know, we often say we don't want, if you have, you know, your opinion on this issue of 1 or 10, we don't, in practice rounds, we don't put a 1 and a 10 together, because then that's when the numbers throw in. We will put like a 3 and an 8 together, because there is disagreement and then there's room for conversation. But you can find somebody you care about, or find somebody you agree with, and just practice, like, how do I tell my stories? How do I start conversations with these questions instead of with numbers and data? How do I hear, as Mary Ellen said, how do I ask or hear that person's story and understand how they came to care the way they do? So we can send that out as well.
Kevin.
Yeah.
A few years ago, I went by someone like that in the street. And I, instead of just giving them some money, I drove around the block and parked behind them and went over to talk to them. And I found out their story, and later found out that they were just being fake. They weren't homeless. They're planning to be, or practice to be pregnant and want money. And they, come as I can researching that. And so it kind of gave me, I can't say everyone's homeless is faking, but some might be. And I don't know who's who until I get to know them. So
Yeah. Again, I think knowing their stories and figuring out,
Yeah.
and getting to know people.
Isn't there something to be, isn't there something to be said for the virtue of loyalty to the groups to whom you belong? I mean,
Yeah.
especially close groups like your family. I mean, if I have a group or a person who is threatening my family with their economic policies or with whatever, isn't it natural that I shouldn't like them very much? Or if I have a politician who is pro-choice, I might not say that person is evil, but do I not have a right to say, well, his morality is somewhat questionable? It seems like there's gray areas here that I'm just
So it's tricky. Let me take those a couple of times. So I think it's very easy to go from person to group or group to person. And so if it was, I hate everybody who votes this way, because I assume everything that they vote for is because of pro-choice. If we just quickly go that way. And so I hate all that. Not that I think they're wrong, because that's okay. To answer your question, I think you're allowed to think they're wrong. You're allowed to think that you can vote against them, right? I think those are all things. I think one of the most important things with the graph that I didn't talk about with the Republican and Democrats, so there were some purple, but there were also some people that were full, that they wanted the borders closed, they want the borders open. And to think or put a false idea that everybody's going to agree on every single issue is just not true, right? I think the idea that politics is messy is good. There's a book I read that said at one point political scientists said that the Congress wasn't polarized enough, which is interesting to think about now. But a long time ago, it wasn't polarized enough. So folks didn't understand who they were voting for. Like, I don't know if you don't belong to a party, parties make our lives easier, right? If I know you, and the groups make our life easier. If I assume you're part of the Democrat Party, or I assume you're part of the Republican Party, I can assume you vote for all these things. I can quickly decide on a ballot, yes or no, because you subscribe to the group's norms. I think what's important is for your neighbor, right, who might have a sign up, to not quickly jump that their sacred value is so different. I think I heard from this table over here, Ben, you might have said this. When we have people pair up often for difficult conversations, we talk about the sacred values. What are those things you're not willing to compromise on? It could be your family, it could be abortion, it could be whatever it is. But often when we put people that disagree, sometimes their sacred values the same. Sometimes it's love of family, love of neighbors, love of all these things. So I think people can come together and see and still think that person's very wrong, but at least see some of that humanity in them. Does that answer some of your? Cool. I'll try. So we talked a lot about science. I think there's some of this that's about strategy. So we have the science. We know that groups happen. We know that we're part of groups, that our loyalty to groups, that we may not always understand the other group, but we want to try. We want to get to know people a little bit better. So what can we do? There's a couple strategies that we'll give you. The first one is just be the best version of yourselves. But we don't want people to change. We don't want you to change your opinions or water down your opinions or values. We want you to be the best version of yourself. And what we call this is think about your superordinate identities. What is that identity that comes to the top? One of the reasons we work with faith groups is because often our faith practices tell us that this is our superordinate, that when we think about our identities, it rises to the top. It could be being a parent, it could be being a family member. But what in our shared identity is it's not who we were raised to be, right? And then maybe if you hear somebody from your congregation saying that a group's evil, then you can say, hey, in the Catholic teaching, that's not who we are. They're wrong. But maybe let's not use the term evil. That's not who our group is. The second thing is similar to that, and this is actually one of the hardest ones. We're big fans of Neville Longbottom at One America Movement. There's probably other examples. For those of you who don't know, Neville Longbottom is a character in Harry Potter who has very little friends in the first book. He grows to have more. In the first book, he doesn't have many friends. He probably has three: Harry, Ron, Hermione, the three main characters of the book. In the last chapter, as the three main characters are getting out of bed to sneak out into the castle, Neville Longbottom stands up to him. And he says, this is not what we should do. Albus Dumbledore, the headmaster in the book, awards Neville Longbottom 10 points, and it allows his team to win the trophy. And he says this quote, which I really love. It takes a great deal of bravery to stand up to our enemies, but just as much to stand up to our friends. And we call that being an in-group moderate. This is not a great term. And we know this. We don't love the term, because the term moderate, people often jump to politically moderate, or to not having strong viewpoints. And that's not what we mean. We want folks on, if you're a Democrat or Republican or Catholic or Protestant, if you're in an in-group and you hear people in your group saying things that you disagree with, not politically, but they're saying the other side's, if they're spouting things that you think are toxic, but that drives up polarization, you got to go to them and be like, hey, let's just lower down that temperature just a little bit. The hardest thing, going back to your loyalty question, the hardest thing about in-group moderates is what happens if you get kicked out. Because if you're an in-group moderate, you know you're not on that side, right? You are very good in your group. You are very good on your side. And if you're telling people on your side to calm down just a little bit, and they say you're out, what happens to you? Because you know you're not with them. One of my coworkers reminds us in political upheavals in countries around the world, the in-group moderates are the ones who get shot first, right? It's a dangerous place to be. It is a hard place to be, because if you're an in-group moderate, you're the one that people think you're on your side, and all of a sudden they don't think you're on your side, even if you still are. If you're the one trying to lower the temperature to your own group, it's very quick to be kicked out, and it's scary. It's a scary thing to do. But in my mind, being an in-group moderate, being that person to call your friends, your peers, your group a little bit closer a little bit closer away from that polarization is one of the best ways to lower toxic polarization in the country. People listen to you if you're their brother, if you go to that same pew, if you're their sister, parent, whatever it is, they'll listen to you more than they'll listen to somebody else. A good reminder to say, this is not who we are. Being okay to critique your own side. Talk about where you disagree with people in your own group, because we know no group's a monolith. Scientifically, we call this the halo effect when we don't do it. Again, often we give, I see this right now actually in both political parties as documents are being found in Biden's garages or other places. So this is very, I think, thing right now. And we can talk more about it, but the halo effect says that, they're on our side, so we're gonna give them that pass, but we would, do something different if they're on the other side. She didn't know any better, it was a different time, et cetera, et cetera. Halo effect is also how these I voted stickers work. If everybody's wearing a sticker and then everybody wants to join that group, and so the pressure to join goes in. People want to join what they think's the good thing to do. That's the halo effect. Allowing others to share their story. Taking time to hear unique life experiences, beliefs, hopes, and fears. And this goes back to Bobby, to what you and your sister could do. Like, have those conversations with people that are different from you. And this helps lower meta perceptions. Going back to this term, when we think the other side doesn't like us, if we open our table and invite people from the other side to sit down with us and have a conversation, we can find out what they do or don't like. And we can maybe find places that we agree on. Expand your group. How do we mix up who we're sitting with? One of our old slogans is that you can sit with us, going back to a Mean Girls reference from the movie, but mix it up and stop sitting with the same people every single time. And no, you don't have to agree, or sitting with somebody and having lunch with somebody. It doesn't mean you agree with everything they agree with. And we call this cross-cut identities. It comes actually from a filmmaker term when they bring scenes together. For cross-cut identities, I think is another really important thing. This example, again, is a small one, but you may be Democrat and I may be Republican, but we both care about this homelessness. We can all fill it in with our blank, probably about something we can think of. Well, this person and I disagree about this issue, but we're both this. We both care about this. One of the reasons One America works with small cities, Grand Rapids, Jackson, Mississippi, Danville, Virginia, is that the city community gets stronger if you're in a smaller neighborhood or smaller community. So we can think what impacts us as Grand Rapidians and how can we come together as Grand Rapidians to solve those issues. So those are the five, right? Think about cross-cut identities, think about being an in-group moderate, think about how do we name our superordinate identities, how do we think through the halo effect when we see it happen, how do we critique our own side. So the last question I'll ask you all, and for the last about 5 minutes, we'll go into this one, is where do you see these strategies playing out in your life? And which of these strategies would you want to work on more in 2023? Where do you see some of these strategies playing out right now? Again, it could be in your own life, it could be in a congregation or somebody you know. And then which of these strategies would you want to work on more as we think about spiritual practices, as we think about cultivating things to do this year, as we think about the time for New Year's resolutions? Which of these would you want to work on more this year? And I'll give you about 5 minutes, then we'll close up. Welcome back. Welcome back, everybody. We're going to come back. So I'd be interested in the last couple of minutes we have together about what are some of the things folks want to work on? What are some of the strategies that folks named as one that you want to think about this year for a New Year's lowering toxic polarization resolution?
I guess for me,
Thanks, Bob.
for me, it's getting to know the other person before I start making judgment calls and bigoted statements and all that. Just what is your journey? What is your story? Tell me about that. Not you're wrong being an atheist. Tell me why you are an atheist. Because I knew you grew up in a Christian home. Kind of like, what's your story? And then I can relate and say, well, what happened that you changed your mind, and what that kind of thing. So just find out their story and stop judging prematurely.
Thanks for sharing.
You never judge, but
I wish it was that easy.
Yeah.
Because I'm a nurse and I know all about the power of story. You can't give good care if you don't know the patient's story, right? But there's an underlining thinking we have that's missing. We see everything as a problem. And if you see everything as a problem, it's either or. You're right, I'm wrong. We learned it in school. I got the right answer. I'm either right or wrong. And that thinking permeates us. And it's hard for us to move to both an and, which is polarity thinking, polarity science.
Yeah.
And the skills of it are so challenging because you have to be a master of dialogue and a master of partnership and relationships to lead to saying your value and my value. But what if we're both right? Won't that drive you crazy? And then to know what to do about it.
Yeah. Yeah, I would say anybody that says these skills are going to happen in a one-day workshop for an hour and a half is lying to you and is probably trying to sell you a magic bean. So I think I use the term the spiritual practices. Something I've been thinking about a lot this year for myself. Is like, what are the things we can work on? That's small steps. Maybe with a family member who we care about a lot. So it's a little bit easier, right? You have that personal relationship. And you already know a little bit about their story. Can you gain a little bit more or think about them a little bit more to get that and instead of it's either me or you?
But Gandhi said, each of us need to be the change we want to see in this world.
Yeah.
And darn it all, it has to start with us and it drives me crazy.
Anyone online want to share insight or question or comment?
I just said that I would like to be more open to listening to other people's stories, just so I can understand where they're coming from.
Thanks, Mitzi.
I think it also would be being brave enough to ask for their story.
Yeah.
Because, then you have to, when you're listening to the story, you cannot form your opinion at that time because you don't have the whole story yet.
Yeah.
And we all have a tendency to like, oh, I knew it. I just knew it.
Mhm.
So, if you're going to be brave enough to do it, then, there's this process of going through it all, and I think that would be very difficult, but I think it's very doable, even if you don't get it right. I think that's where we struggle too is, I want to get it right, man, Well, no, maybe you'll get one thing right. And then next time, two things. So,
yeah. I guess I used to work in an interfaith center, and often I'd hear that people didn't want to talk about religion because they're afraid they're going to get something wrong about a different tradition. And so they would just be quiet about it. And I think often that's what it is, that we have a fear of being wrong or a fear of offending somebody or a fear of asking the wrong question. And it is brave to ask the story. I know when I'm having a disagreement with somebody, I know somebody is on the other side of an opinion, like I'll often think about every question ahead of time and be like, if they say this, I'll zag here, I'll zig here. I'm not really listening. And so it is being brave because you have to sit there and actually listen without jumping to the next question. We'll go.
Father Ricky.
Father Ricky will be our last speaker, trying to get people out of here.
Oh, okay. Thanks. I just wanted to point out something that Sean brought up at the beginning. I believe it was Sean, that our community, I'm a Paulist priest, along with Father Jack, that our community just started a toxic polarization initiative. Just to let you know, next, one of the things we're planning, we're going to be having some kind of national gathering on this topic, either the spring or summer of 2024, right in time for the next presidential elections. So please stay tuned about that because we'll probably be connected with all of our Paulist foundations and keep us in your prayers. Thanks. It's really encouraging, by the way, to see this going on. I understand that Father Stephen Bell was there as well. So I'm sure he was dynamic as always.
He was indeed, Father Ricky, and you'd be able to, if anyone wants to see Father Bell's presentation from this past November, that's on our YouTube channel. So you're certainly welcome to, as well as tonight's presentation will be posted as well. Kevin, any final thoughts?
Yeah, so I just appreciate you all coming out here tonight. It is hard, right? I think I think the loyalty for our groups, right, is strong for our families, right, as we think through policies that we disagree with and think about why we disagree, how we disagree. You know, we were talking, and I think we talk about how we form groups through evolution, right? As we talk about, it comes through faces and seeing the lion. And so it's not something that's going to change overnight. We don't want that to change overnight. Groups are important for survival, right? Without groups, we're lonely. Loneliness causes high rates of sickness. What we want is for folks to be able to come together for those conversations, come together with somebody in your pew who you disagree with, think through what you might share. See people as not just the sum of their political identity, but get to know their actual personal story a little bit more. And I think the most important thing is you're allowed to say, you are wrong. I disagree with you. You are wrong. I'm going to vote a different direction. That's okay. It's when that wrong becomes you are evil, you are otherized. We often say it's us and them is, you know, the one level. It's us versus them. Or it's us or them. And oftentimes we're in the us versus them, and that's okay. It's when it becomes that us or them is where it becomes very dangerous.
I think it's important to really believe that we can toxic polarization.
Yeah.
We can prevent it. And it takes a whole lot of it to do it, but we can.
So if you have time, there's another quick survey up here that I'd love for you to quickly take. But I know we're also over time, so I'll let Mark close us.
All right.
Close us out.
Kevin, thank you. Yeah, thank you very much. Again, this evening was just as rich as last month in talking about storytelling. A lot of great strategies that if you're still looking for a New Year's resolution, this might be one of those. And our conversation continues. Kevin and I are talking about the possibility of other topics coming up this spring that we'd be able to, again, offer another 2-month series back to back. So you can, if you want to find out more, you can certainly sign up to receive our weekly newsletter and it's free and it just comes to your mailbox, inbox, and we'll be happy to keep you up to date with other upcoming programs, such as next week, we'll have the opportunity for some dialogue and encounter as we're hosting another one of our ecumenical dialogues as part of our Synod series. Sister Maureen Geary, who's a Dominican sister, Grand Rapids Dominican, will be meeting with Reverend Lynette Sparks of Westminster Presbyterian and talking about how we share responsibility for our common mission as Christians. And then on February 1st, Reverend Nuria Parrish, who's an ordained minister, Episcopal ordained minister, and runs Plain Song Farm, will be meeting with Catholic Spiritual Director Brian Plachta to talk about dialogue in church and society and the Catholic and Protestant point of views on that. So we hope you'll join us for those coming up.
I don't know if my belching will help at all, but those are some real great speakers. I can just say that. Some good names coming out.
Thanks, Kevin. As far as wrapping up this evening, we're going to be posting this video to our YouTube channel of tonight's presentation. We'll send you the video link by email if we have your email address, as well as an evaluation form, because we would love your honest and frank feedback about your experience here tonight, either at the Catholic Information Center or online by Zoom, and ways that we can continue to improve the programming that we offer here. And of course, you can partner with us in other ways as well, not only providing feedback, but of course, paying it forward by making a donation so that other people can attend future events like this one, getting our newsletter, checking out our social media pages, Facebook, Instagram. And then also, we're so glad that those of you who were here this evening, come back and visit us. We're going to be having a new art exhibit going up at the end of January of Mary Sayre's work. She does a lot of paintings of the reef. She does a lot of underwater diving and then converts those into paintings. And for the hope of raising awareness about the ecological damage that's happening to our water system around the planet. And she'll also be providing a presentation in February for us. And folks on Zoom, even Father Ricky, please come visit us sometime. We'd love to have you. And you can find us at the intersection of faith and life or here at 360 Division Avenue Southeast. And everyone have a great night. Thank you again for being here.